The alien jungle was quiet, too quiet, and that made Michael uneasy. Tall trees with wide, twisted roots stood like silent giants, their thick leaves blocking most of the moonlight. The air was heavy with the smell of damp earth and strange flowers. And far away, something moved in the shadows. Michael was heading back to his small camp after a long day of searching for food. His pack only half full. He was tired, his legs aching, and his mind already thinking about resting. Then he heard it. It was faint at first, like a distant cry carried on the wind. He stopped walking, holding his breath, listening. The sound came again. Sharper, this time, a scream. Not a normal scream, not the sound of an animal. It was the sound of fear, pure and desperate, and it was not human. Michael's heartbeat quickened. He had been on this alien world long enough to know that curiosity could get you killed. Still, the sound pulled at him. He could not ignore it. He looked toward the dark path between the trees where the scream had come from. Every instinct told him to stay away, but his feet started moving. The jungle seemed to grow darker the deeper he went. Vines brushed against his arms, and strange insects clicked in the shadows. The cries grew louder, mixed now with voices deep, rough, and chanting. He crouched low and moved carefully, each step slow and silent. Through the trees, he saw a glow. It was the orange flicker of fire. Michael's breath caught in his throat. As he stepped closer, he pushed aside a branch and froze. Before him was a clearing filled with tall, pointed tents made of animal skins. Torches lit the area, their flames dancing in the night air. Figures moved around the fire, large, muscular aliens with rough, scaled skin and sharp bone ridges across their faces. They wore little clothing, just belts with weapons and necklaces made of teeth and claws. In the center of the clearing, the fire burned bright and hot. Above it, tied to thick wooden poles, was a young alien girl. Her skin was a deep violet that glowed in the firelight. Her hair was long, pale, and tangled. She wore only small pieces of gold cloth, as if dressed for some kind of ritual. Her arms were stretched wide, tied tightly to the poles, and her feet dangled just above the flames. She screamed again, her voice breaking, struggling to pull away, but the ropes held tight. Michael felt his stomach twist. He had seen cruelty before, but this was different. The tribe was chanting louder. Now, moving in a slow circle around the fire, one of the aliens stepped forward. Holding a spear tipped with black stone, the girl thrashed, her golden eyes wide with terror. The heat from the fire was so close it must have been burning her skin. He ducked back behind the tree, breathing hard. Every part of him knew this was not his fight. These were not his people. Interfering could mean his death. But then another scream cut through the chanting, raw and hopeless, and he knew he could not just turn and walk away. Michael scanned the camp quickly. There were at least a dozen warriors, maybe more. Some were close to the fire. Others guarded the edges of the clearing. He noticed a small path leading around the back of the largest tent. If he moved fast and quiet, he might get closer without being seen. The voices of the warriors rose, their chant becoming faster. He glanced again at the girl. Her eyes were wet with tears, her chest heaving as she fought to breathe in the heat. He didn't know her, didn't even know her species, but something about her helplessness struck deep inside him. She was alone, and maybe, right now, so was he. Michael pulled the small knife from his belt. It wasn't much, but it was sharp. The fire popped loudly, sending sparks into the night air. He took one last deep breath and began to move. Staying low, using the shadows, his eyes locked on the ropes that held her. If he timed it right, he could get to her before the tribe made their final move. Somewhere deep inside, he felt the cold rush of fear. But fear, he reminded himself, was better than regret. And regret was something he wasn't ready to live with. Not tonight. Michael stayed hidden behind the thick trunk of a tree. His body pressed against the rough bark. The chanting from the camp was growing louder, the rhythm matching the pounding of his heart. From where he crouched, he could see more clearly now. The alien warriors were huge, each at least a head taller than him, with broad shoulders and arms that looked strong enough to break bone with a single strike. Their scaled skin glistened under the firelight, the patterns different on each warrior. It's almost like a tribal mark. Some had tusks curving from their lower jaws, others had horns jutting from their foreheads. They all carried weapons-long spears, heavy clubs, and curved blades that caught the light with a dangerous gleam. The alien girl was still struggling against the ropes, her violet skin now glistening with sweat. Michael could see her wrists and ankles turning raw where the rope bit into her. She twisted and pulled, her muscles trembling with the effort. The fire beneath her crackled and spat, the heat making her flinch away every time the flames surged higher. Her eyes darted around, searching for some kind of help. But every face she saw was filled with cruel excitement. Michael's jaw clenched. He tried to count the warriors, 12, maybe 13, but shadows made it hard to tell. There were also smaller figures, probably women and children of the tribe, standing back near the tents, watching the scene as if it were entertainment. Every instinct told him this was not just an execution. It was a ritual, the chanting, the way the warriors moved in a circle. The decorated skulls hanging from the poles all pointed to something sacred to them, which meant interrupting it would not just anger them, it would make them hunt him. To the ends of this jungle, Michael scanned the camp for weaknesses. The clearing was roughly circular, with the fire at its heart. The largest tent stood on the far side, its entrance flapping slightly with the wind. 2 guards stood there, holding long spears, their attention fixed on the ritual near the edge of the camp, just past a line of stacked wooden crates. He saw a spear leaning against a postern guarded. If he could get to it, he'd at least have a longer reach than his small knife. But the real problem was the girl's position. She wasn't just tied at the wrists, and ankles thick ropes bound her chest to the vertical pole, and another rope stretched across the top, keeping her suspended above the fire. Cutting her free would take time he didn't have if the warriors noticed him. The chanting slowed for a moment, replaced by deep drum beats from somewhere behind the tents. A tall warrior stepped forward, his scaled skin painted with streaks of red and black. In his hands, he held a long staff with a blade at one end. He pointed it toward the girl, speaking words Michael couldn't understand. The others answered with a roar, stomping their feet against the ground in unison. The fire seemed to grow taller. Michael's stomach twisted whatever was about to happen. It would happen soon. He felt the weight of the choice pressing down on him. He could leave now, disappear into the jungle, and no one would know. It wasn't his world. And this wasn't his fight. But as he looked at the girl again, her trembling body, her eyes wide with terror, he knew the truth. If he walked away, her screams would follow him forever. He took a slow breath, calming his nerves. The guards at the far side shifted slightly, their eyes drawn toward the drumming. It was the moment he had been waiting for. Michael slid deeper into the shadows, moving along the tree line, every step deliberate and quiet. He skirted around the side of the camp, his eyes always on the warriors. Twice he had to freeze, pressing himself into the roots of a tree when one of them glanced his way, but the drums and chanting were loud enough to hide most of his movement. He reached the stack of crates near the edge of the clearing. Carefully, he crouched and peered around. The unguarded spear was only a few steps away. His muscles tensed. He darted forward, grabbed it, and slid back behind the crates. The weapon was heavier than he expected, the shaft thick and rough in his hands. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. From this angle, he was closer to the girl, close enough to see the panic in her eyes. She noticed him, her gaze locking on his through the flames. For a moment, her expression changed. Confusion mixing with fear, she shook her head slightly as if to warn him away. Michael understood the message. This was suicide. But he also knew he wasn't leaving without trying. The drumming quickened again, and the tall warrior raised his staff high. The crowd roared in response. Michael's time was running out. His mind raced, forming a plan in seconds. He'd have to create a distraction, something big enough to draw the warriors away. Then, in that small window, he'd free her, grab her, and run. It was insane, dangerous, and almost certain to fail. But it was the only chance they had. Michael's grip tightened around the rough spear shaft. His knuckles pale, the firelight painted the world in shades of orange and red. Shadows flickering across the warriors' scaled faces. The tall leader still stood before the flames, his voice booming in a language Michael couldn't understand. Each word seemed to build the tension in the air. The crowd of warriors stomping in rhythm. Michael could feel it. He was running out of time. The alien girl hung suspended above the fire, the ropes creaking as she squirmed and twisted. Her violet skin shimmered in the heat. Her golden eyes locked on the leader with a mix of fear and defiance. She was strong. Michael could see it in the way she held herself, but strength meant nothing against fire. The air above the flames was already shimmering, the heat waves rising. If he didn't move soon, she would burn. He scanned the camp again, forcing his mind to focus. The tribal warriors were spread around the circle, most of them focused on the ritual. But two were pacing near the edge, their heads turning from side to side. If he ran in now, those two would spot him instantly. He needed to pull them away. Break their attention, something loud, something dangerous, something they couldn't ignore. Michael's eyes found the crates again, stacked high and uneven. If he could topple them, it might cause enough noise to pull some of the warriors toward the sound, but it might also reveal his position. Another idea sparked in his mind: the torches. A few stood planted in the ground near the tents, the flames licking at the night air. If he knocked one over and lit something else on fire, it could cause chaos, and chaos was exactly what he needed. He took a slow, steady breath. Step 1. Create a distraction. Step 2. Cut the girl free. Step 3. Grab her and run toward the thickest part of the jungle. He didn't know where they'd go after that. But first, they had to survive the next few minutes. The drumming grew faster, almost frenzied. The leader raised his staff again, the blade catching the firelight. Michael didn't know the alien language, but he didn't need to. He could tell. The moment of execution was seconds away. His muscles coiled like springs. Now or never. He slid along the edge of the clearing, moving toward the nearest torch. The warriors were chanting so loudly now that they didn't notice him. He reached the torch, grabbed the wooden shaft, and yanked it free from the dirt. The fire flared brighter with the movement. He turned and shoved it into the base of the nearest tent. The dry hide catching almost instantly. Within seconds, flames began to crawl upward. The smell of burning leather filled the air. Michael didn't stay to watch. He dashed toward the crates and shoved hard against them. The pile teetered, then crashed to the ground with a deafening thud. Wood splintered, metal pots rolled out, clanging loudly. Shouts rang out from the far side of the camp. Several warriors turned, their chanting broken, and began running toward the noise. Others shouted warnings, pointing toward the spreading fire on the tent. Michael ducked into the shadows. Keeping low as he moved toward the center, the leader was still there. But his attention was drawn toward the chaos at the edge of the camp. The alien girl's eyes widened as Michael emerged from behind the poles. Her mouth opened to speak, but he quickly shook his head, putting a finger to his lips with his free hand. He pulled the small knife from his belt and reached for the first rope. The fibers were thick and rough, but the blade was sharp. It took only a few quick sawing motions before the rope frayed and snapped. The girl gasped, her arm falling free. He moved to the other side. Cutting at the ropes binding her wrists, one by one, they fell away. The heat from the fire was intense now, sweat running down Michael's face and stinging his eyes. He could feel the flames licking dangerously close to his legs. The girl's ankles were next. He leaned down, slicing through the bindings as the last rope fell. She dropped into his arms, lighter than he expected. Her breathing was ragged, her body trembling. But she clung to him instinctively. A loud roar cut through the noise. One of the warriors had seen him. Michael's head snapped up to see a huge figure charging toward them. Spear raised, he grabbed the rescued girl's hand and yanked her away from the fire. "Run!" he hissed, even though she might not understand his words. Her legs stumbled at first, but then she found her balance. Together, they sprinted toward the gap in the camp's defenses, behind them. The leader's voice roared commands, the sound of many feet pounding after them. Michael knew they had seconds before the entire tribe was on their heels. The rescue had worked, but survival was far from certain. The night exploded into chaos. Michael's boots pounded against the hard earth as he pulled the alien girl with him. Weaving between the shadows of tents and fleeing tribal aliens, behind them, angry shouts rose above the crackle of burning leather. The fire he'd set now. Spreading across the camp, orange light danced on the trunks of the surrounding jungle trees, throwing flickering shadows like grasping hands. The girl stumbled, her knees buckling from exhaustion. Michael tightened his grip on her wrist and half pulled her forward, knowing that if they slowed even for a second, the warriors would be on them. A deep, guttural roar cut through the air, the voice of the tribal leader. Michael glanced back just long enough to see the tall, horned alien pointing in their direction. Several warriors broke from the ritual circle, spears in hand, their heavy feet thundering over the dirt. The gap between the tents narrowed into a small path lined with poles and woven cloth banners. Michael darted through it, the girl close behind. As they reached the open clearing beyond, the firelight still chased them, illuminating the sweat on their faces and the terror in their eyes. Ahead lay the jungle, dense, dark, and full of dangers of its own. But Michael knew the trees were their only hope. They plunged into the thick foliage, leaves whipping against their faces. Roots clawed at Michael's boots, trying to trip him, but he kept running. His ears filled with the sound of breaking branches and snapping twigs as the warriors followed. The girl's breathing was ragged, each gasp almost a sob. But she didn't let go of his hand. It struck him, even in this moment, how much fight she still had left after everything she'd endured. They broke through into a shallow ravine, the moonlight barely reaching the bottom. Michael stopped just long enough to pull the girl down into the shadows. Crouching low, he held a finger to his lips, listening. The pounding footsteps were getting closer, voices barking sharp commands in the tribal tongue. A spear whistled through the air and struck a tree trunk just above their heads. Splintering wood, Michael's heart slammed against his ribs. They had to keep moving. He grabbed her hand again and scrambled up the opposite slope, the loose dirt. Sliding under their feet at the top, the jungle opened into another patch of firelight, this time from torches held by a second group of warriors. Michael cursed under his breath. The tribe wasn't just chasing them. They were circling ahead, cutting off escape routes. The girl's eyes darted toward the right, where a narrow path snaked between two massive trees. She tugged on his hand, trying to lead him that way. Michael hesitated for only a moment before. Trusting her instinct, they sprinted down the path. The sound of pursuit splitting into two directions now. One group was close behind, the other moving to intercept. The path curved sharply and spilled them into another clearing. But instead of open space, it was filled with hanging vines, thick enough to hide them. Michael yanked the girl into the dense curtain of greenery. Wrapping one of the vines around his arm for balance, the thick leaves muffled their breathing. But it also trapped the heat and scent of smoke that still clung to their clothes. They could hear the warriors passing close by, their guttural voices rumbling. One torchlight beam swept across the edge of the vines, then moved away. Michael's chest heaved in relief, but he didn't dare move yet. The girl's hand trembled in his. Her golden eyes found his in the faint light, and she whispered something in her own language, soft, urgent, and filled with meaning he couldn't understand. Still, he nodded, hoping it reassured her. Above, something rustled in the branches, a low growl vibrating through the air. Michael looked up, half expecting another alien predator, too. Glowing eyes blinked back at him from the darkness of the canopy. He didn't know if the creature was friend or foe. He didn't have the luxury of finding out. The warriors' voices were fading, moving toward the left side of the clearing. Michael took the risk and motioned for the girl to follow. Pushing through the vines on the opposite side, the jungle ahead was darker now, the firelight gone. The ground sloped downward, and the sound of running water reached his ears. A river fast-moving, from the sound of it, if they could reach it. The current might help hide their trail. Branches whipped against them as they pushed forward. The girl stumbled again, and Michael caught her before she fell. Her legs were shaking badly now, her energy almost gone. "We're close," he whispered. Though she likely didn't understand, still, the sound of his voice seemed to keep her moving. Finally, they broke out onto the rocky bank of the river. The water was black in the moonlight, churning over jagged stones. Michael scanned the bank, no sign of the warriors yet, but they would be here soon. He turned to the girl and pointed toward the water. She hesitated, eyes widening in fear. "It's this or them," he said, motioning again. With no more time to argue, he took her hand and stepped into the icy current. The shock stole his breath, but he forced himself forward, pulling her with him. The water rose to their knees, then to their waists, the current pushing hard behind them. Faint torchlight began to flicker through the trees. Michael tightened his grip on the girl's hand, and together they let the river carry them into the darkness. The icy water roared in Michael's ears as the current dragged them downstream. The alien girl clung to his arm, her body shivering from both the cold and the shock of being plunged into the river. Every muscle in his body screamed to fight the current, but Michael knew better. He resisted too much. The water would pull him under. Instead, he kicked hard, steering them toward the darker side of the river, where overhanging roots and vines offered some cover. Behind them, voices shouted from the bank, torchlight danced between the trees. The beams stretching across the water, a spear splashed into the river just behind them, sinking into the depths. Michael ducked lower, pulling the girl with him until only their eyes and noses were above the surface. The cold made his teeth chatter, but the fear kept his focus sharp. The river twisted around a bend, and for a moment, the voices faded. They let the current carry them farther, the overhanging branches whipping past above their heads. Michael spotted a thick cluster of roots hanging into the water and steered them toward it. Grabbing hold, he pulled the girl into the shadows. Beneath the overgrowth, the sound of the river muffled their breathing. But Michael kept his eyes scanning the water. He knew the warriors wouldn't give up so easily. The girl's chest rose and fell rapidly, her breath shallow, her golden eyes found his in the dim light. She whispered something low and urgent, but he shook his head. "I don't understand," he murmured, keeping his voice barely audible. She gestured toward the forest beyond the riverbank, her expression tense. Michael followed her gaze and spotted it a faint glow of torchlight moving quickly along the opposite side. The tribe was splitting their forces, searching both banks. Michael's heart pounded harder. Staying in the river was dangerous, but getting out too soon would put them right in the path of the hunters. They needed to slip away somewhere the warriors wouldn't expect. He waited until the torchlight faded again, then pulled them both free of the roots. The current caught them instantly, spinning them toward the center of the river. Michael fought to angle them toward the right side now, where the bank rose steep and rocky after several exhausting minutes. They reached the edge. Michael boosted the girl up first, her fingers clutching at the wet stones until she found her footing. He scrambled up after her, his arms shaking from the effort. The river was now just a cold, rushing roar behind them. But the forest ahead loomed thick and dark. They pushed forward into the undergrowth. Their wet clothes, heavy against their skin, every step squelched against the muddy ground. Michael cursed softly under his breath each sound they made could give away their position. Still, they had no choice but to move. Suddenly, a snapping twig behind them made him freeze. The girl stopped too, her eyes going wide. Michael slowly turned his head and saw it a shadow between the trees. Tall and broad-shouldered, one of the warriors had tracked them. The alien's eyes caught the faint moonlight, glowing faintly like an animal's. It raised a spear and stepped forward, silent and deliberate. Michael's mind raced. Running would only alert the rest of the hunters, but staying still meant being cornered. He spotted a fallen branch half buried in the mud near his foot, thick and solid enough to use as a weapon. Slowly, he crouched and wrapped his fingers around it. The warrior moved closer. No more than a few paces away now. Michael could smell the smoke still clinging to its armor. Then, in a sudden blur of motion, Michael swung the branch upward, striking. The warrior's spear aside, the alien roared, stumbling back a step. The girl darted behind Michael, her small hands gripping his arm. The warrior recovered quickly, lunging forward again, but Michael sidestepped, swinging the branch with all his strength into the side of its head. The crack of impact echoed through the trees. The warrior staggered, dropped its spear, and fell to one knee, dazed. Michael didn't wait to see if it would get up. Go. He hissed to the girl. Shoving her forward, they sprinted deeper into the forest. Weaving between thick trunks behind them, the warrior's roar rose again longrier. This time, man was soon joined by more voices. The others had heard. They ran until Michael's lungs burned and his legs felt like lead. Finally, they stumbled into a small hollow surrounded by dense bushes. It wasn't much, but it was hidden. Michael pulled the girl down with him, lying flat against the damp ground. Their breaths came in short, ragged gasps through the leaves. He saw shadows moving, torchlights sweeping across the forest floor just a few meters away. The hunters were here. Michael lay flat in the hollow, every muscle tight, his body pressed into the damp earth. The alien girl was beside him, her breathing shaky but quiet, her golden eyes locked on the shifting torchlight through the bushes. The hunters were close, so close, Michael could hear the crunch of their boots on the forest floor and the low rumble of their voices. The heavy scent of smoke and sweat drifted in the air. One wrong sound, one wrong move, and they'd be dragged back to the tribal camp. Or worse, a beam of torchlight swept directly over their hiding place. Michael's hand instinctively moved to the girl's shoulder. Pressing her down gently, the warrior holding the torch paused, scanning the area. Michael's heart hammered. In his chest, he could see the glint of the alien's eyes, the sharp bone ridges of its face. But after a tense few seconds, the warrior turned and moved on, the light fading into the trees. Michael exhaled slowly, Hesa misting in the cool night air. He tilted his head toward the girl and mouthed, "We move." She nodded. Her lips pressed tightly together. They crawled forward, keeping low, careful not to rustle the leaves too much. Each movement was slow and deliberate, every step a calculated risk. They circled away from the path where the hunters had gone. The ground sloped gently upward now, and the air grew cooler. Michael could hear the distant rush of the river somewhere behind them, but he didn't dare head that way again. It would be too easy for the tribe to predict. Instead, he aimed toward higher ground, hoping the rough terrain would slow the warrior's pursuit. The jungle changed here, the trees standing farther apart, the undergrowth thinning, the moonlight filtered through the canopy in silver beams, giving Michael just enough light to see the rocky ridges ahead, but it also meant they were more exposed. He moved faster, the girl keeping pace despite the exhaustion in her steps. Her bare feet were silent on the dirt, almost ghost-like. Michael glanced at her. There was a quiet determination in her eyes now, a spark of something that hadn't been there when he'd first found her above the fire. A sudden snap of wood behind them made Michael whirl around. A warrior stepped into the open, not 20 meters away. Its scaled skin gleamed under the moonlight, its spear already raised. Michael didn't think. He grabbed the girl's hand and bolted for the ridge. The warrior roared, charging after them. More voices erupted from the darkness, answering the call. The slope was steep, loose stones rolling under their feet as they climbed. Michael's legs burned with the effort. Halfway up, the girl slipped, falling to her knees. He caught her under the arms and hauled her upward, his own balance threatening to give way. A spear whistled past, striking the rocks with a sharp crack. They didn't look back. One wrong move, and it would all be over. The horn's deep, rumbling call seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath their feet. Michael didn't stop running, his breath misting in the cool air. The alien girl stayed close, her bare feet barely making a sound, but he could hear her. Breaths coming fast and sharp. Every few steps, she glanced behind them, her golden eyes glinting in the moonlight. Michael didn't need to look to know the hunters were coming. He could feel it, like a shadow pressing against his back. The glow ahead grew brighter with each step. It wasn't flickering like fire. It was steady, pale, and strange. Not the warm gold of torches, but a bluish white that pulsed faintly. Michael had seen that kind of light before years ago, on another planet. It meant technology. If they'd found a settlement, there was a chance for safety, or danger, depending on who lived there. They crested a small rise, and the light spread out before them. In a shallow valley sat a cluster of structures. Not quite buildings, and not quite tense-woven frames covered in panels that shimmered faintly as if made from insect wings. A soft hum filled the air, the sound of some unseen machinery. Michael slowed, scanning the area for movement. The girl stepped up beside him, her eyes fixed on the settlement. She whispered something, the tone uncertain, almost questioning, before Michael could answer. A sharp crack echoed in the distance, not the sound of wood breaking, but of a spear striking rock. They didn't have time to debate. He took her hand and led her down the slope, keeping low as they approached the strange structures. When they reached the edge of the settlement, Michael realized it wasn't abandoned. Shapes moved inside the nearest building, silhouettes shifting behind translucent walls. A faint metallic scent hung in the air, mixed with the earthy smell of the jungle. Michael's grip on the spear tightened. He was about to step forward when a soft voice spoke behind them. "Stop where you are." Michael spun, pulling the girl behind him. A figure stood in the shadows, tall, lean, wearing a sleek suit of dark armor that caught the moonlight. Its helmet was smooth and featureless, except for a thin glowing strip where the eyes should be. The voice came again, calm but firm. "You're trespassing. State your business." Michael's mind raced. He could tell from the accent it wasn't one of the tribal aliens. Maybe this was their chance. "We're being hunted," he said, his voice low but urgent. "We just need shelter for the night." The armored figure tilted its head slightly, studying them. Its gaze or whatever sensors were behind that visor lingered on the alien girl. Michael could feel her hand tightening around his, her body tense. She was their prisoner. Michael added quickly, "I got her out. They'll be here any minute." The figure was silent for a moment longer, then raised one hand to its helmet. A faint click. and its voice came through again, speaking to someone else now, to inbound. One human, one unidentified female. Pursuit imminent. From inside the settlement, more figures emerged, moving quickly but with quiet precision. Their armor was similar, though each had slight variations, different gear. One stepped forward, a smaller figure with a softer voice. This way. Quickly. Michael didn't hesitate, pulling the girl after him. They were led between two of the shimmering structures into a narrow passage. The hum of machinery grew louder, and for a moment, Michael felt a flicker of hope. But as they stepped into the light, he saw the girl's expression change. Her eyes widened in relief. But in recognition, she froze, pulling back on his hand, whispering something sharp and fearful. Michael frowned. Looking from her to their armored guides. "What is it?" he asked, but she just shook her head, her voice urgent and low. Before he could press her, a loud, distant roar echoed from the jungle. The tribe was close now. The armored leader turned sharply to the others' positions. "Hold them at the perimeter." Several of the guards moved off at once, their weapons glowing faintly. Michael was ushered deeper into the settlement, the girl still tense beside him. He glanced at her again, her gaze kept darting toward the buildings as if she knew what was inside. And then, as they passed an open panel, Michael caught a glimpse of something that made his stomach twist. Rows of cages, each one holding beings of different species. Some asleep, some staring silently out at the world. Not a settlement. Not a sanctuary, it was a holding camp. Michael's steps slowed, but the guard behind him shoved him forward. "You'll be safe here," the leader said flatly. The words didn't sound like a promise, they sounded like a verdict. The alien? Girl's hand squeezed his tightly, her golden eyes meeting his. Whatever she said next was quiet enough only for him to hear. But he understood it without knowing her language. "We escaped one prison, only to walk into another outside." The first clash of battle cries split the night as the tribe reached the perimeter. Inside, Michael realized their fight for survival had only just begun.